There's something about the open road. The way the world falls away behind you. The long stretches of highway where time seems to slow. It's freedom, they say. Solitude. Escape. But not every road leads somewhere safe. I'll share with you 5 true road trip nightmares, told from the voices of those who experienced them. They aren't about ghosts jumping out of shadows. They're about the slow crawl of dread, the sense that something's not quite right, and the quiet things that follow us when we think we're alone. So settle in, let the sound of rain keep you company, and let the road take you somewhere darker.
Story 1.
It was sometime past midnight, early last fall, when I decided to take a back road I hadn't driven in years. I was heading back from my cousin's place in western Pennsylvania, and I remember thinking the interstate felt too sterile, too bright, too fast. I wanted something quieter. So I veered off onto Route 217, a winding stretch of road that carved through small wooded towns most people had forgotten. It had been raining on and off all evening. That soft, steady drizzle that makes everything feel a little slower, a little heavier. The kind of rain that muffles the world. My wipers were set to a slow rhythm, and I remember watching them, almost hypnotized, as they cleared away the droplets. The hum of the engine and the soft ping of rain on the roof were the only sounds. I hadn't seen another car for what felt like 20 miles. The woods on either side of the road pressed close, thick with late summer leaves just starting to turn. Occasionally, my headlights would catch the glint of old road signs, barely legible, their paint peeling with age. That's when I saw her. It was subtle at first, just a pale blur at the edge of my high beams. A figure, standing still at the side of the road. As I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She was maybe in her early 20s, wearing a light blue dress that clung to her from the rain. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and her long dark hair hung wet across her shoulders. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there like she'd been waiting for something. My first thought was that something had gone wrong. Maybe a car had broken down, or she'd been walking for miles in the rain. Either way, I couldn't just leave her there. So I slowed the car and pulled up beside her. I rolled down the window a crack. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, slowly. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the rain. "Can I get a ride? Just a little ways down." Her tone wasn't panicked or scared. Just tired, worn, like she'd been walking for a long time. I unlocked the door, and she climbed in without hesitation. Didn't say anything. Didn't even shiver, though she was soaked straight through. The inside of my car filled with the faint scent of lavender and wet earth. She sat with her hands in her lap, looking straight ahead. "Where you headed?" I asked, easing back onto the road. "Just down a bit. I'll let you know when." That was all she said. We drove in silence for a while. The only sound was the rain tapping on the windshield and the occasional creak of the wipers. I glanced at her a couple times, trying not to be obvious. She didn't look scared or anxious. Just quiet. Still. Like she was deep in thought. Something about her unsettled me, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was how calm she was, or how she never once looked at me. Just stared out the windshield like she was watching for something. I tried making small talk. "Rough night to be out walking," I said. She nodded, but didn't reply. "You live around here?" Another nod. Still no words. After a few minutes, I gave up on the conversation and focused on the road. The rain had picked up a little, and the narrow road was slick. My headlights carved long shadows through the trees. We passed a rusted-out mailbox, a broken fence, a sign for a campground that had clearly been abandoned years ago. "Here," she said suddenly. "You can let me out here." I looked around. There was nothing but woods. No houses. No lights. Just dark trees and the glint of wet asphalt. "You sure?" I asked, slowing the car. She gave the smallest nod. Her hand was already on the door handle. I pulled over, expecting her to say something else. But she didn't. She opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I blinked, and for half a second she was gone. I leaned over, looking out the passenger side window. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just rain and trees. I turned on the interior light, thinking maybe she'd dropped something. Her seat was wet from her clothes, but otherwise empty. I sat there for a minute, confused. Then I got out and called into the woods. "Hey, you okay?" But no response. I listened hard, straining to hear footsteps, rustling, anything. But there was nothing. Just the sound of rain dripping from the leaves. I stood there in the quiet for a long moment, heart beating just a little faster than before. Then I got back in the car and drove. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I couldn't get her out of my head. Something about it all felt off. So I did what anyone would do. I Googled it. I looked up stories, news articles, local legends. And I found something. 20 years ago, give or take a few, there had been a car accident on that very stretch of Route 217. A young woman, early 20s, blue dress, had been hitchhiking home from a party. She never made it. They say the driver lost control on a rainy night and slid into a tree. The woman didn't survive. Over the years, people have reported seeing her. Always at night. Always in the rain. Always just standing by the side of the road. They say she's still trying to get home. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I never really did before. But that night, I picked up a woman who didn't talk, didn't shiver, didn't look me in the eye. And when she left the car, she vanished like smoke in the rain. I still drive that route sometimes. Not often. But when I do, I keep an eye on the shoulder, just in case she's still waiting.
Story 2.
This happened to me 3 years ago, and I still don't have an explanation that makes sense. I've told this story to maybe 2 or 3 people in my life, mostly because I know how it sounds. But it's true. Or at least, what I experienced felt real. Too real to shake off. I was 27 at the time, living alone in a small apartment just outside of Missoula, Montana. I'd taken a week off to drive down to Boise to visit an old college friend, someone I hadn't seen in years but kept in touch with through the occasional message or birthday call. The plan was simple: leave on a Monday, stay the week, head back Saturday. The drive from Missoula to Boise isn't that long, around 7 hours, give or take, but I took my time on the way down. Stopped to eat, filled up where gas was cheapest, even pulled over a few times just to enjoy the scenery. The way back, though, that's when it happened. It was Saturday evening. I'd left Boise a bit later than I planned, closer to 7 p.m., but I wasn't too worried. I like night drives. Fewer cars, fewer distractions. I brought coffee, downloaded some podcasts, and planned to take one of the lesser-known back routes up through the forested areas between Idaho and Montana. It added about 45 minutes, but I thought it'd be more peaceful. At first, it was exactly that. The kind of quiet you forget exists when you live near traffic. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the sound of rain steadily starting to fall. It wasn't heavy, just that light, whispering kind of rain that dots the windshield and makes you feel like the world is tucked under a blanket. The road was narrow and winding, cutting through thick woods on both sides. My headlights barely reached beyond the trees. No cell service, no gas stations, no towns. Just long stretches of dark. It was around 10:30 p.m. when I noticed the first pair of headlights in the distance behind me. Just a dot in the rear view. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, even these roads had occasional traffic. But something felt off. The car didn't gain on me. It stayed at the exact same distance behind me, too far for me to make out the shape, but close enough that I couldn't shake the feeling it was watching me. I slowed down a little, curious to see if it would pass. It didn't. So I sped up. Not recklessly, just enough to put some distance between us. The headlights did the same. Never gaining. Never falling back. Just there. Following. For a while, I convinced myself it was just another driver heading the same direction. Coincidence, nothing more. Still, I couldn't help but keep checking the mirror. Every 30 seconds or so. Always those lights, unmoving, unwavering. I passed a small turnout, one of those gravel patches they use for emergency stops, and decided to pull over for a moment. Let them go ahead, shake this weird feeling. So I did. I signaled, pulled to the right, and came to a slow stop under a canopy of trees. The rain made soft ticking sounds on the roof. I waited, and waited, but no car passed. I looked back. The headlights were gone. At first I figured maybe they turned off, maybe they took another road. But that didn't make sense. This wasn't an area with multiple exits or side streets. It was one narrow road through dense forest. Feeling a little unsettled, I eased back onto the road. No more lights behind me. I drove for about 10 more minutes, trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong. But just as I rounded a wide curve, the headlights were back. Same distance. Same brightness. Same strange, steady presence. Like they'd never left. Only now, they felt closer. I tried not to panic. Tried to tell myself it was just someone who'd stopped like I did. Maybe they were nervous about the road too. But then I noticed something. There was no bounce to the light. No shift as the road curved or dipped. Just two perfect orbs, locked in position like they were floating. Like eyes. I sped up. Turned up the defrost, leaned forward, focused on the road. The rain had picked up now, tapping harder on the windshield, fogging the edges of the glass. I was going well over the speed limit, heart thumping hard in my chest, trying to make it to the next town. Anything with lights, people, a gas station, anything. But the next 15 miles were nothing but darkness and trees. Then, without warning, the headlights disappeared. Just gone. Not dimmed. Not turned. 1 second they were there, and the next, the road behind me was black. I slowed down to a crawl, checking my mirrors, half expecting them to pop up again. But they didn't. They never came back. I made it home sometime after 1 a.m. Pulled into my apartment complex, shut off the engine, and just sat there for a long while. listening to the rain, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. The next day, I checked the route online. There were no turnoffs where the lights vanished, no driveways, no forks, just a single stretch of two-lane road through dense forest. I tried to forget about it, convinced myself it was just a weird coincidence. Maybe the car had no taillights. Maybe I missed a dirt road in the dark. But the part one can't shake is how those lights moved. Or rather, how they didn't. They didn't sway or shake like headlights usually do on uneven ground. They just floated, dead still, as if whatever was behind me wasn't driving. It was watching. And to this day, whenever I drive at night in the rain, I still check the rearview a little more often than I used to.
Story 3.
This happened about 5 years ago, on a solo road trip I took across New Mexico. I was heading from Phoenix to Denver, trying to break the drive into smaller pieces so I could stop and see a few lesser-known places along the way. Old mining towns, scenic detours, stuff like that. That night, I was somewhere in northern New Mexico, taking a back route that Google Maps recommended as faster with no traffic. Big mistake. The area was remote. No cell service. Long, quiet roads. Desert on both sides. No homes, no towns, just scattered power lines and stretches of land that seemed to go on forever. I wasn't in any particular rush, but as the sun started to dip below the horizon, I realized I was running low on gas. Like lower than I should have let it get. I figured I had enough to make it to the next town, but I kept getting this uncomfortable feeling, like something wasn't quite right. It wasn't fear. It was more like tension building in my chest for no clear reason. Maybe I was just overtired. Maybe the landscape was getting to me. Finally, I saw a sign. Gas food 3 miles ahead. It looked old and rusted, but I was too relieved to care. I followed the arrow down a narrow side road until I reached a gas station sitting just off a wide gravel lot. There were no other cars. No lights inside the convenience store. Just 2 ancient-looking pumps and a flickering green, open, sign in the window. I pulled up to one of the pumps, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The place felt off. Like it had been abandoned for a long time but was somehow still functioning. The gas pumps were old enough that they didn't have card readers. So I figured I'd have to pay inside. I walked to the door and tried the handle. It opened. Inside, the air was still and stale, like a room that hadn't been entered in months. There was no music, no hum of refrigerators, just silence. A few of the overhead lights were on, but dim. Dust floated in the beams like slow-moving snow. Shelves were stocked neatly. Chips, candy, canned soup, nothing expired, as far as I could tell. The coffee station was clean. Cups stacked. Stir sticks in their holders. But no one was there. I walked slowly up to the counter, half expecting someone to pop out from the back. There was an old register. A cup filled with pens. A handwritten note taped to the counter that read, "Pay before pumping. Someone will be with you shortly." I waited. Nothing. I said, "Hello?" once, loud enough to echo a little. No response. I walked back to the coolers, peeked down the narrow employee hallway. Still nothing. No sign of anyone. No door slamming, no sound of movement. Just this unsettling stillness. It didn't make sense. Everything was too clean, too set up. I thought maybe someone had stepped out. Maybe they lived close and ran over for something. So I waited. For 10, maybe 15 minutes. Still nothing. I walked back out to my car, thinking maybe there was a card reader hidden on the pump somewhere. There wasn't. But when I looked back at the station, something had changed. The open sign that had been flickering earlier was off. I stared at it, trying to remember if maybe I'd imagined it. But no, I was sure it had been on. A green neon glow, pulsing faintly behind the glass. The air outside felt heavier now. Still no wind, no cars, no insects. Just total, unnatural quiet. I stood there for a while, debating whether to wait longer or just keep going and hope for another station down the road. That's when I noticed something in the corner of my eye. A shape behind the window. Movement. I looked straight at it, and it was gone. Just empty shelves and shadow. I walked back to the door, gripped the handle, and it wouldn't budge. Locked. I hadn't locked it. There hadn't been a lock on the handle at all, just one of those simple push-pull bars. Now it was stiff, jammed. I backed away slowly, and for the first time all night, I felt a real kind of fear settle in my gut. Not panic, but something deeper. Something that told me I needed to leave. Right then. I got back in my car, turned the key, and thankfully the engine started without issue. The gas light was fully on now, blinking red. But I didn't care. I drove. Back down the gravel path, onto the main road, and just kept going. I drove for another 20 miles on fumes before I came across a lit-up Chevron. It looked like heaven. Clean, bright, with actual people inside. I filled up and went inside to grab a bottle of water. At the counter, the clerk was this older guy with a kind face. I asked him if he knew about the gas station a few miles back, the one with no staff. He frowned a little. Then he asked, "The one off the gravel road?" "Yeah," I said. "Old place. Stocked shelves, flickering sign. No one working." He looked at me for a long second. "That place has been closed almost 10 years, he said. "Owner passed away. Building's still there, but it's boarded up." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. He nodded slowly. "You're not the first to say something like that. Few folks claim they've seen it open. Always at night. Always empty." I left the store and sat in my car for a while. I hadn't imagined it. I'd walked the aisles, seen the lights, heard the hum of nothingness in the still air. To this day, I don't know what it was. Some weird trick of the mind, a pocket of time looping in on itself, or something else entirely. But I'll tell you this. I never leave the house on a road trip without a full tank anymore. And if I ever see another open sign flickering in the middle of nowhere, I'm not stopping to check.
Story 4.
This story still messes with me when I think about it too long. Not because anything overtly terrifying happened. No monsters, no chases, no ghostly figures. But because of the lingering sense that something was deeply, deeply wrong. Wrong in a way I still can't explain. It happened about 6 months ago, when I was driving from Tulsa, Oklahoma, up to a small town outside of Omaha to visit my aunt. She'd had some medical issues, and I offered to help her around the house for a week or two while she recovered. It was an 8-hour drive, mostly highway. I left just after lunch on a Thursday. The weather was clear, traffic was light, and I had snacks, water, and a full tank of gas. Everything felt normal, smooth. Around 5 p.m., somewhere in southern Nebraska, I realized I needed to stop and stretch. Maybe grab a coffee. My legs were getting stiff, and I wanted a break before the final push. Google Maps showed a small town not far from the route. It didn't have a name I recognized, just Colville. Sounded quiet. Out of the way. Perfect. I turned off the highway and onto a 2-lane road that led toward it. The sun was low, casting long shadows across open fields and scattered trees. After about 10 minutes of driving, I saw the town come into view. If you can call it that. It was small. Really small. Maybe 4 or 5 blocks wide at most. Old buildings, most of them brick, lined a main street that curved gently through the center. There was a post office, a diner, a little grocery, and a few other storefronts with faded awnings and dusty windows. What struck me first was how clean everything looked. No trash. No graffiti. Just empty. I pulled in near the diner, parked, and stepped out. The air was still. Not quiet, still. There were no birds. No passing cars. Not even the buzz of a power line. Just a silence that felt too perfect. I walked up to the diner. Its windows were clear, table settings in place. Specials. Board near the door still listed meatloaf and mashed potatoes for $6.75. It looked open, but there were no lights on inside. I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old fry grease. Chairs were pushed in. Salt and pepper shakers filled. Napkin holders stocked. But no one was there. No sound from the kitchen. No clatter. No voices. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, feeling like I had walked into a pause scene in a movie. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed slightly. No response. Eventually, I backed out and let the door swing closed. The weird part? It wasn't just the diner. Every building I checked was the same. The grocery store had fruit on the shelves. The post office had letters sorted behind the counter. The gas station, yes, there was one, had lights on above the pumps, but no attendant. No hum of a cooler. Just silence. No people. No animals. Not even a breeze. And the town felt lived in. Like everyone had just stepped away for a second. Left their lives mid-step. I started to feel disoriented. Not panicked. Just this heavy unease that settled in my stomach. Like something wasn't syncing up. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I walked back to my car, figuring I could at least use my phone to look this place up. Maybe they'd had some emergency evacuation or something weird I hadn't heard about. But I had no service. Not even a single bar. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, trying to shake the feeling. Trying to make sense of it. And then, in my mirror, I saw a person. Just for a second. A man standing near the corner of a building across the street. He wasn't moving. Just standing there. Watching. When I turned around to look. No one. Just empty sidewalk. I sat frozen for a moment. Then I started the engine. As I pulled out of town, I noticed something else. The gas station? The lights above the pumps were off now. The sign out front, which had been faintly glowing when I arrived. Completely dark. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. The second my tires hit the highway again, my cell service came back. 3 bars, then 4. Maps reloaded. Colville was still listed, but when I tapped on it, nothing. No photos. No reviews. No street view. Just a name on the map with no information. Later, I looked it up on my laptop. Found a few mentions, old census records, mostly. Population, 241 as of the last update in the 1990s. Since then, nothing. No recent articles. No satellite photos. Like it had faded out of time. I tried to go back once. Took the same exit, followed the same road. But it wasn't there. I ended up on a stretch of farmland. Just open fields and a rusted gate. No curve in the road. No diner. No gas station. Just miles of grass. I don't know what happened. Maybe I fell asleep for a moment at the wheel. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. But I still remember how the air felt when I stepped into that town. Like I'd crossed into something that wasn't mine. And I've never felt quite right about taking unmarked detours since.
Story 5.
This happened when I was 26, driving back from a friend's wedding in Northern California. I'd taken time off work to make it a bit of a road trip. Spent some extra days driving up the coast, camping here and there, enjoying the solitude. So I packed up early the next morning and hit the road. I didn't have a strict route back to Los Angeles. I just knew I wanted to avoid the main freeways. That meant winding through some unfamiliar back roads in the foothills south of Redding. The day started out fine. Weather was clear, traffic non-existent. But around 3 p.m., my dashboard lit up, first the check engine light, then the battery icon, then a strange grinding noise from the front of the car. I pulled off onto the shoulder of a narrow two-lane highway, not really panicked, just annoyed. The car had been reliable until now. It wasn't brand new, but I kept up with the maintenance. I popped the hood, checked what I could, belts, fluid levels, battery cables. But I'm no mechanic. And besides, it was starting to get hot out, and I didn't have any shade. There was no signal on my phone. No bars. Just the spinning wheel of searching for network. I stood there for a while, waiting, listening. No cars. No voices. Just the faint sound of wind passing through dry grass and distant trees. Eventually, I decided to start walking. I figured the nearest town, or at least a house, had to be somewhere down the road. I locked the car, slung my bag over my shoulder, and started walking south, hoping for a gas station or even a ranch. About 20 minutes in, I started to hear something. At first, I thought it was an animal in the brush, deer maybe, but the sound wasn't quite right. It was low, rhythmic, a soft tapping. I stopped and listened. Tap, 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 then silence. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't close, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. I looked around. Nothing. Just empty road, low hills, scattered scrub trees. I kept walking. Another few minutes passed. Then again. Tap, 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 tap. Followed by what sounded like a dragging noise. Not loud. Not clear. Just barely audible under the wind. I turned, looked behind me. No one. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, scanning the tree line. That's when I noticed something odd. The wind had stopped. Dead still. No birds. No insects. Just this growing silence that made the world feel paused. I moved forward, a little faster now, trying not to break into a jog. I still couldn't see anything out of place, but the tapping had gotten a little louder. Not closer, necessarily, just clearer. Like it was tuned to a frequency I could hear now. After a few more minutes, I saw something ahead. A small building off the side of the road. It looked like an old rest stop, one of those one-room concrete boxes with a bench and maybe a public phone. Only it was crumbling. Graffiti on the outside. No lights. No cars. But I needed a place to regroup, maybe get out of the sun. I walked up to it and peeked inside. There was a bench against the far wall, an old trash can in the corner, and a cracked tile floor with dark stains I didn't want to look too closely at. But no phone. I sat down, heart still beating a little too fast, and took a long drink from my water bottle. I pulled out my phone again, still no service. I looked around, listening. Nothing. I stayed there for maybe 10 minutes. And that's when I heard it again, clearer than ever. Tap. Tap. Tap tap. It was coming from outside now. Just around the corner of the building. I held my breath. Then something scraped. A low, dragging sound. Like wood or metal being pulled across gravel. Slow. Deliberate. I stood up and quietly stepped to the doorway. I didn't go around the corner. I didn't want to. Instead, I moved as silently as I could toward the back of the building and waited, listening. The sound came again. Tap. Pause. Tap tap tap. Then, silence. I waited, barely breathing. Nothing. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to peek around the edge. There was no one there. But something had been dragged through the gravel. A set of parallel marks trailing from the tree line to just behind the building. They stopped maybe 10 feet from where I stood. I didn't wait any longer. I turned and ran. Back toward the road. Back toward my car. I don't remember the walk back. Just the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement and my own breath in my ears. When I finally reached my car, I climbed inside, locked the doors, and turned the key. Miraculously, it started. The grinding noise was still there, but it ran. I didn't stop again until I reached a real town nearly an hour later. Pulled into a mechanic's shop, shut the car off, and didn't look back. I asked the mechanic if he knew of any old rest stops back along the 139 heading south. He frowned, shook his head. Closest one like that got torn down years ago, he said. Too many accidents out that way. People kept seeing weird things. I asked what kind of weird things. He paused for a moment, then just said, noises. Things in the woods. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. I stayed in town that night, booked a motel, and left in the morning. I never found out what made that sound. Never saw anyone. But I still remember that quiet stretch of road. The feeling that something was watching from just beyond the trees. And the sound of tapping that wasn't quite human. The road has a way of remembering. Stories left behind like tire tracks in the dirt. Some fade with time. Others linger. Whether it's a gas station that shouldn't exist, a town that vanishes when the sun rises, or footsteps in the gravel when no one's there. These stories remind us that sometimes the real strangeness lives not in where we're going, but in where we pause along the way. Thank you for listening. If you're still awake, I hope your dreams are calm. And if you're still on the road, keep your eyes on the rear view, just in case.